The discovery. Commander Elena Torres stared at the holographic display floating above her command station. Her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. The signal pulsing on the screen should not exist. Could not exist. Yet there it was, undeniable and impossible, broadcasting from a region of space that every star chart marked as empty. The EMS Horizon had been conducting routine surveys of the Outer Veil sector for 3 months. It was supposed to be simple work, the kind that let young crews gain experience without facing real danger. Elena had accepted the assignment because she needed time to think, time to decide if 20 years in space was enough or if she had one more mission left in her. She had not expected to find something that would rewrite everything humanity knew about the universe. Commander, I've triple-checked the analysis. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood beside her, his dark eyes wide with something between excitement and fear. The signal is using quantum entanglement patterns that we only theorized about 5 years ago. Whoever is broadcasting this has technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. Elena nodded slowly, her mind racing through possibilities. Humanity had been exploring space for nearly 400 years. They had encountered 47 different intelligent species, built alliances with some, fought wars with others, and learned to navigate the complex politics of a crowded galaxy. But this signal was different. It carried a weight that made every other discovery feel small. "How old is it?" she asked, though part of her did not want to know the answer. Webb hesitated. His fingers moved across his console, pulling up data streams that he had clearly reviewed multiple times. Based on the quantum decay signatures and the gravitational time dilation markers, the transmission source has been active for approximately 2.8 billion years. The bridge fell silent. Even the soft hum of the ship's systems seemed to fade as the crew processed what they had just heard. 2.8 billion years. That was before complex life evolved on Earth. Before dinosaurs, before fish, before anything that could be called advanced existed on humanity's homeworld. "That's impossible," said Dr. Sarah Chun, the ship's lead scientist. She had moved to stand behind Elena's chair, her hand gripping the headrest so tightly her knuckles had turned white. No civilization could survive that long. Stellar drift alone would force multiple planetary relocations. Resource depletion, genetic degradation, technological stagnation. There are 1,000 reasons why a species couldn't maintain a presence for that length of time. And yet the signal exists, Elena replied quietly. She made her decision with the calm certainty that had kept her alive through 2 decades of dangerous missions. Set course for the source. All departments prepare for potential first contact protocols. And someone wake up Ambassador Oren. If this is what I think it is, we'll need a diplomat. The Horizon moved forward through the darkness, its engines creating ripples in space-time that carried it faster than light toward the impossible signal. Elena stood on the bridge and watched the stars streak past, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. She had joined the exploratory fleet because she wanted to see what lay beyond humanity's borders. Now she was about to meet something that had existed since before humanity's ancestors crawled from the oceans. 3 hours later, the source of the signal materialized on their view screens, and Elena felt her breath stop completely. The structure was massive beyond comprehension. It stretched across space like a crystal flower in bloom, each petal the size of a planetary moon. Light moved through it in patterns that hurt to follow, colors that had no names in any human language. The thing was beautiful and terrible and ancient, and looking at it made Elena want to weep without understanding why. Reading massive energy outputs across all spectrums, Webb reported, his voice shaking slightly. Whatever this is, it's still fully operational. The power generation alone exceeds the total output of every star system humanity has colonized combined. A new voice spoke through the bridge speakers, not transmitted through their communication systems, but somehow appearing directly in the air around them. It was old, infinitely old, but also warm and filled with something that sounded remarkably like joy. "After so long," the voice said, and Elena felt tears forming in her eyes without knowing why. "After searching through so many millennia, you have finally come. Welcome, children of Earth. Welcome home." Elena forced herself to speak, though her voice came out rougher than she intended. This is Commander Elena Torres of the Earth military ship Horizon. We come in peace, representing the United Planetary Federation. Who are you? We are the Keepers, the voice replied. We are the first ones, the eldest children of this galaxy. We have watched life bloom and fade across 10 million worlds. We have seen species rise to touch the stars and fall back into darkness. And we have been waiting, searching, hoping to find what we thought was lost forever. The structure began to change. One of the massive petals unfolded, revealing an interior that glowed with soft golden light. Elena felt the ship shudder slightly as some invisible force gently pulled them forward. Do not be afraid, the Keeper said. We will not harm you. We wish only to meet you, to speak with you, to understand if you are truly what we have been seeking. Ambassador Orin had arrived on the bridge, his scaled skin, a mark of his Valorian heritage, shimmering with the colors that indicated both curiosity and concern. He was one of the few non-humans in the Federation's diplomatic corps, and his people had been allies with humanity for nearly 2 centuries. Commander, this is unprecedented. We should wait for support. Bring in a full diplomatic team and military escort. Elena shook her head. If they wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. Whatever this is, whoever they are, they've been here for billions of years. If they've waited that long, I don't think they'll appreciate us making them wait longer. She turned to her crew. All hands, prepare for docking procedures. Webb, Chin, you're with me. Orin, I'd appreciate your perspective on this. The landing bay that received them was vast enough to hold 100 ships the size of the Horizon. The air that flowed into their vessel when the airlock opened was warm and carried the scent of something that reminded Elena of old libraries and spring rain. She led her small team down the ramp, her hand resting on the plasma pistol at her hip more for comfort than any real belief it would be useful. The chamber they entered defied understanding. The walls seemed to be made of compressed starlight. Images moved across every surface, showing things that Elena's mind struggled to process. She saw stars being born and dying, planets forming from cosmic dust, life emerging from primordial oceans on worlds she had never seen. And threading through all of it were beings made of light and thought, watching everything with what seemed like infinite patience. A figure materialized before them, coalescing from the air itself. It took a form that was almost human but not quite, as if it was trying to make itself familiar without fully succeeding. Its eyes were ancient beyond measure, but they looked at Elena's team with an expression she recognized immediately. Hope, you must forgive our appearance, the figure said. And Elena realized this was the same voice they had heard earlier. We exist beyond physical form now, but we remember what it was like to have bodies, to walk on solid ground and feel wind against our faces. We shape ourselves this way to make you more comfortable. What do you want from us? Elena asked directly. She had learned long ago that dancing around important questions rarely led anywhere useful. The figure smiled, and the expression was heartbreaking in its gentleness. We want to know if you remember. That is all. We want to know if you carry what we thought was lost. Remember what? Dr. Chun stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. Everything, the Keeper replied. The dead, the lost, the failures and the mistakes, the species that no longer exist and the civilizations that fell into darkness. Do you remember them? Do you carry their stories with you? Elena exchanged glances with her team, confusion evident on all their faces. I don't understand what you're asking. The Keeper's form flickered, showing brief glimpses of other shapes, other forms. Let me show you, it said, and the chamber transformed around them. They stood suddenly in what looked like a massive library, but the books were not made of paper. They were constructed from light and memory, each one containing the complete history of a species. Elena reached out tentatively and touched one of the glowing volumes. Knowledge flooded into her mind, not as words but as pure experience. She saw a species called the Tharmine, who had built cities of crystal and composed symphonies using the solar wind. She felt their joy when they first left their world, their wonder at discovering they were not alone in the universe. And she felt their ending, a plague that swept through their civilization in less than a generation, leaving empty cities and silence. When she pulled her hand away, tears were streaming down her face. "They're all gone," she whispered. "Yes," the keeper said softly. "They are all gone. 47,000 species have risen and fallen in this galaxy since we first began watching. Some died naturally, their stars burning out or their worlds becoming uninhabitable. Some destroyed themselves through war or environmental collapse. Some simply faded, losing the will to continue. We recorded them all. We saved every story, every achievement, every dream. We became the memory of the galaxy because we could not bear to let them be forgotten." Ambassador Orin had touched one of the light books and stood frozen, his skin cycling through colors that indicated deep distress. "My people," he said, his voice breaking. "There's a book here about my people. But we didn't go extinct. We're still alive. This volume records what was lost," the keeper explained. "Your species survived a great catastrophe 18,000 years ago, but 90% of your population died. The cities they built, the art they created, the languages they spoke, all of that vanished. The Valorians who exist now descended from the survivors, but you lost so much. We kept what you forgot." Elena looked around at the endless library, at the countless volumes representing civilizations that no longer existed or had lost pieces of themselves to time. "This is what you've been doing for billions of years? Recording everyone. Remembering everyone?" "Yes," the keeper said, "because someone must. When the last member of a species dies, when the last person who remembers them is gone, they die a second time. We vowed that we would never allow that final death. We would keep their memories alive forever." "But why contact us?" Webb asked. "Why now? Why humanity?" The keeper's form brightened, and Elena saw something in its ancient eyes that looked remarkably like tears. "Because we are dying," it said simply. "We have maintained ourselves for billions of years through technology and will, but we are not immortal. We are fading, our energy diminishing with each passing millennium. In another million years, perhaps less, we will cease to exist. And when we are gone, all of these memories, all of these stories will vanish with us." The weight of those words settled over Elena like a physical thing. Billions of years of history, countless species and civilizations, all of it would be lost when the keepers finally faded, unless something changed. "You need someone to inherit this," she said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. "You need someone to take over as the memory keepers of the galaxy." "Yes," the keeper said. "We have tested hundreds of species over the past million years. We have searched for someone who could carry what we must pass on. Species with the technology to maintain our archives, species with the longevity to survive the ages, species with the curiosity to explore and discover. But they all failed." "Failed how?" Dr. Chen asked. The chamber shifted, showing images of other species standing where Elena's team now stood. She recognized some of them, the proud Nexorians with their 4 arms and crystalline exoskeletons, the collective consciousness of the Thyran, the mysterious architects who had disappeared centuries ago. "The Nexorians were brilliant," the keeper said. "They had technology that rivaled our own in some ways. But when we showed them our library, when we offered them the burden of remembering, they declined. They said that dwelling on the dead was a waste of resources, that looking backward prevented moving forward. They believed that only the present and future mattered." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "The Thyran could have been perfect," the keeper continued. "They were a hive mind, capable of storing vast amounts of information across millions of individuals. But they had no concept of individual loss. When we showed them the Tharmine story, they could not understand why it mattered. To them, death was simply recycling. The individual was meaningless. Only the collective mattered. More images flashed by, more species, more failures. Each one had lacked something essential, some quality that the keepers needed in an inheritor. "And then," the keeper said, and its voice filled with that strange hope again, "we found you. We found humanity. And when we looked into your hearts, into your cultures and your histories, we discovered something that we thought had died out in the universe. Something that we ourselves had almost forgotten we once possessed." "What did you find?" Elena asked, though part of her was afraid of the answer. The keeper gestured, and the chamber filled with images of Earth, but not the gleaming cities and orbital stations of humanity's present. These were old images, ancient ones, memorial walls covered with names of the dead. Museums dedicated to species humanity had driven to extinction, monuments to fallen enemies, libraries preserving languages that no one spoke anymore, ceremonies honoring ancestors who had died centuries before. "You remember," the keeper said, and there was wonder in its voice. "You remember your dead. You remember your mistakes. You carry guilt like a sacred treasure, refusing to let it go. You build monuments to your failures and teach your children about them. You preserve the stories of those who opposed you, who fought against you, who lost to you. You cannot forget, and more importantly, you do not want to forget." Elena felt something shift in her chest, a realization that made everything suddenly clear. "That's why you chose us. Not because we're the smartest or the strongest, but because we're the ones who carry our past with us." "Yes," the keeper said. "Every other species we tested eventually decided that the burden of memory was too heavy, that dwelling on loss was wasteful or painful or unnecessary. But humans, you embrace the pain. You face it. You say, 'This happened, and we will never forget, and we will never let others forget.'" The chamber returned to its original form, the library of lost civilizations surrounding them. The keeper looked at Elena with those ancient, hope-filled eyes. "We have one final test," it said. "One last question before we can know if you are truly the ones we have been searching for. Will you look into our deepest memories? Will you see what we have seen, feel what we have felt? Will you carry the weight of billions of years of death and loss and still choose to remember?" Elena looked at her team. Webb was pale but determined. Chun was crying openly but nodding. Even Ambassador Oren, despite his earlier distress, stood ready. "Yes," Elena said. "Show us. We'll carry it. That's what we do." The keeper smiled, and the light around them began to change. "Then prepare yourself, children of Earth. You are about to experience what it means to be the memory of the galaxy." The golden light enveloped them, and Elena felt herself falling into memory, into loss, into the beautiful and terrible weight of 3 billion years of life and death. And somewhere in that endless ocean of experience, she finally understood why they had been chosen. The inheritance. The memories crashed over Elena like a tidal wave of light and emotion, each one a complete life, a complete civilization, burning itself into her consciousness. She experienced the Tharmeans' first moment of self-awareness, felt the warmth of their twin suns on crystalline skin that would never exist again. She lived through the Vorthians' golden age, walking through cities of impossible beauty that had crumbled to dust 1,000,000 years before Earth formed. She felt the Karathis' last desperate moments as their sun expanded, consuming their world while they sang songs of defiance into the dying light. And she remembered them all. It should have broken her. The sheer volume of loss, the weight of countless extinctions, the agony of civilizations that fought so hard to survive only to fail in the end. It should have shattered her mind into fragments. But it did not, because woven through every memory of death was memory of life, of joy, of small moments of beauty that made existence worthwhile even in the face of inevitable ending. When Elena finally emerged from the ocean of memory, she was kneeling on the floor of the chamber, tears streaming down her face. But she was whole. Beside her, Webb was sobbing openly, his arms wrapped around himself as he processed what he had experienced. Dr. Chun was laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Even Ambassador Oren had been changed, his skin displaying colors that Elena had never seen before, emotions too complex for his species' usual palette. "You endured," the keeper said, and its voice was filled with something that sounded like relief. "You looked into the abyss of galactic history and did not turn away. You felt the weight of 3 billion years of death. And you are still here. You are still standing." Elena wiped her eyes and forced herself to stand, her legs shaking with exhaustion. "How do you bear it?" she asked. "How have you carried this for so long without being crushed by it?" The keeper's form solidified, becoming more defined than before. For the first time, Elena could see its face clearly, ancient beyond measure, worn by ages of existence, but somehow still gentle. "The same way you will," it replied, "by remembering that memory is not a burden. It is a gift. Every story we save, every life we preserve in our archives, is an act of love. The dead do not truly die as long as someone remembers them, and we have remembered them all." "But you said you're dying," Webb said, finding his voice again. "You said you need someone to inherit this because you can't maintain it forever." "Yes," the keeper acknowledged. "We have perhaps 1,000,000 years remaining before our energy dissipates beyond recovery. We have tried to extend our existence, but some things cannot be avoided forever. Eventually, all things must end, even us." Dr. Chun had moved to one of the light books, her fingers hovering just above its surface. "And you want us to take over? To become the new memory keepers of the galaxy?" "If you are willing," the keeper said. "If you can accept the responsibility and the burden. If you can promise to remember not just your own dead, but everyone's dead. To be the memory of the galaxy for as long as your species endures." Elena felt the weight of the question settling over her shoulders. This was not a decision she could make alone, not something that one person or one ship's crew could decide. This was a choice that would define humanity's role in the galaxy for generations to come. But looking at her team, seeing the determination in their eyes despite the tears still drying on their faces, she knew what they would choose. "We need to bring our leaders here," she said. "The Federation Council, representatives from all the member species. This is too important for one person to decide." "We understand," the keeper said, "and we will wait. We have waited billions of years already. We can wait a little longer." The journey back to Federation space took 3 weeks. Elena spent most of that time in her quarters, processing what she had experienced and trying to find words to explain it to people who had not been there. How could she make them understand the beauty and tragedy of the Keeper's library? How could she convey the weight of responsibility they were being offered? The Federation Council convened in an emergency session within hours of the Horizon's return. Elena stood before representatives from 37 different species, including humans, and tried to explain the impossible. She showed them recordings from the Keeper's structure, played back the ancient voice that had welcomed them, and described the test that she and her team had endured. "They're offering us a role that no other species has been deemed worthy of," she concluded. "They want humanity to become the memory keepers of the galaxy, to preserve the stories of every species that exists or has existed, to make sure that nothing and no one is ever truly forgotten." The council chamber erupted into debate. Some representatives saw the offer as a great honor, others as a dangerous trap. The Nexorian delegate stood and spoke passionately about how dwelling on the past would prevent humanity from reaching its full potential. A Thyran representative argued that individual memory was meaningless compared to collective progress. But it was Ambassador Oren who finally silenced the debate. He rose from his seat, his skin displaying the deep blue of profound truth, and spoke in a voice that commanded attention. "I have been to the Keeper's library," he said. "I have touched their memories and felt what they carry, and I have seen what no Valorian has seen in 18,000 years. I have seen what we were before the catastrophe, who we were before we forgot. The Keepers saved that part of us when we could not save it ourselves." He turned to face the human representatives directly. "My people have been allies with humanity for 2 centuries. In that time, I have often wondered what made humans different, why they formed such strong bonds with us when other species remained distant. Now I understand. Humans mourn. You do not just mourn your own dead, you mourn everyone's dead. You build monuments to species you drove to extinction. You preserve languages that died before you were born. You cannot help but remember, and that makes you the only species capable of accepting what the Keepers are offering." The council voted the next day. It was not unanimous, it never is with such momentous decisions, but the majority agreed. Humanity would accept the Keeper's offer and begin training to take over the role of Galactic Memory Keepers. 6 months later, Elena returned to the Keeper's structure at the head of a fleet of vessels. She brought historians and archivists, linguists and data engineers, diplomats and scientists. She brought people who had dedicated their lives to preserving human history and were ready to expand their scope to include the entire galaxy. The Keeper welcomed them with the same warm joy it had shown during that first meeting. Over the following months, it taught them how to maintain the vast archives, how to add new memories, how to preserve stories in ways that would survive the ages. The work was overwhelming, the amount of information staggering, but the human teams approached it with determination and reverence. Elena spent her days walking through the library of lost civilizations, learning their stories one by one. She read about the Manthari, whose philosophers had developed concepts of time that human mathematics still could not fully describe. She studied the Kelvin, whose art had been so beautiful that other species had started wars just to possess it. She memorized the names of the Trevik, every single individual of a species that had numbered only in the thousands but had loved each other with an intensity that brought tears to her eyes. One evening, as she sat in a quiet corner of the archives, the Keeper materialized beside her. "You look tired," it said gently. Elena smiled wearily. "I am, but it's a good tired. The kind you feel when you've done work that matters." "Yes," the Keeper agreed. "We know that feeling well." It settled beside her, its form becoming almost solid. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you do this? You have seen what we carry, felt the weight of it. You know how heavy this burden can become. Why would you willingly take it on?" Elena thought for a long moment, trying to find the right words. "Because someone has to," she finally said. "Because these people, these civilizations, they lived. They loved and laughed and cried and dreamed. They built beautiful things and struggled with terrible things. They were real. And if no one remembers them, if their stories are lost, then it's like they never existed at all. That's a kind of death that's worse than the first one." The Keeper was silent for a while, its ancient eyes studying her face. "You understand," it said eventually. "You truly understand what we have been trying to preserve all these eons." "I think I do," Elena replied. "Memory is not about dwelling in the past or refusing to move forward. It's about honoring what was, acknowledging that it mattered, and carrying those who came before us into the future. It's about love, really. Love that doesn't end just because someone dies." "Yes," the Keeper said, and its voice was thick with emotion. "That is exactly what it is. And that is why we chose humanity. Because you understand that love transcends death, that memory is an act of defiance against the cruelty of time." Over the next year, the transfer of knowledge accelerated. The Keeper taught humanity everything it knew about maintaining the vast archives, about searching for new civilizations whose stories needed to be preserved, about the delicate art of recording memory in ways that captured not just facts but feelings and context. Human teams spread out across the galaxy, establishing listening posts and research stations, making contact with species both known and unknown. But perhaps the most profound change came not from what humanity learned, but from what humanity taught. One day, Dr. Chun approached Elena with an unusual request. "We want to add something to the archives," she said. "Something new." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, confused. The archives were meant to preserve what already existed, not to create new content. Chun smiled, that excited smile she got when she had made a breakthrough. "We want to add human stories. Not just the facts of our history, but our myths and legends, our fiction and poetry. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who we want to be." Elena frowned. "But those aren't real history. They're made up." "They're real in a different way," Chun argued. "The Keeper has preserved facts and events, but humans don't just remember facts. We remember stories. We turn our history into narratives that teach us lessons and give us meaning. I think those narratives matter too." When Elena brought the idea to the Keeper, she expected resistance. Instead, the ancient being's eyes lit up with something that looked like wonder. "In 3 billion years," it said slowly, "no one has ever suggested that. Every species we tested focused on facts and data. But you are right, stories are how meaning is preserved. Stories are how the dead speak to the living." It paused, its form flickering with what might have been excitement. "Yes, Add your stories. Add all of them. The archives began to transform. Alongside the factual records of lost civilizations, human curators added the myths those civilizations had told themselves, the legends they had passed down, the fiction they had created. The library became not just a record of what happened, but a record of what people dreamed could happen, what they feared might happen, what they hoped would happen. And something unexpected occurred. Other species, seeing what humanity was doing, began to contribute their own stories. The Valorians added their epic poems. The Nexorians, despite their initial reluctance, contributed their philosophical thought experiments. Even the Thyran, who claimed not to understand individual narratives, sent their collective dreams. Strange, beautiful visions that made no logical sense but resonated emotionally in ways that surprised everyone. The library was alive in a way it had never been before. It was not just a museum of the dead but a celebration of the living, a testament to the creative spark that made consciousness something more than just biochemical reactions. 2 years after first contact, the keeper called Elena to a private chamber deep within the structure. She had never been to this part of the archives before. The walls here were different, darker somehow, but also more intimate. "It is time," the keeper said. "Time for me to tell you the final truth. The one I have kept secret until you were ready to hear it." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What truth? The keeper's form shifted, becoming more solid than she had ever seen it. For a moment, it looked almost human. An old person, tired but content, ready to rest after a long life. "We told you that we scattered the seeds of life across the galaxy billions of years ago," it said. "That was true. What we did not tell you is that those seeds carried something more than just the building blocks for DNA. They carried a piece of us, a fragment of our consciousness, our souls if you will. Every species that evolved from our seeding carries that fragment, buried deep in their genetic code." Elena's mind raced, trying to process the implications. "Are you saying that every intelligent species in the galaxy is descended from you?" "In a way," the keeper agreed. "Not genetically, evolution took its own path on each world. But spiritually, yes. You are all our children, all of you. The Nexorians, the Thyran, the Valorians, humanity. All of you carry a piece of what we once were." "Then why choose humanity specifically?" Elena asked. "If we're all your descendants, why not share this responsibility among all of us?" The keeper smiled, and in that smile Elena saw ages of sorrow and hope intermixed. "Because of all our children, only humanity remembered how to mourn. Only you retained the understanding that love and loss are inseparable, that memory is sacred, that the dead matter as much as the living. The others lost that understanding as they evolved, or they buried it beneath layers of practicality and progress. But you kept it. You carried it through your entire history, even when it hurt, even when it would have been easier to forget." Elena felt tears forming in her eyes again. "So this was always about finding someone who could love the way you loved, who could remember the way you remembered." "Yes," the keeper said simply. "And you are that someone. Not just you personally, but your entire species. You are the ones who will carry our love forward into the ages after we are gone." The chamber began to glow brighter. Elena realized that this was goodbye, that the keeper was preparing to transfer the last of its knowledge and responsibility to humanity. "Will you fade now?" she asked. "Is this the end for you?" "Soon," the keeper replied. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. We have held on this long to find you, to make sure you were ready. Now that we know you are, we can finally rest." "I wish you didn't have to go," Elena said, surprised by how much she meant it. In the 2 years since first contact, she had come to care deeply for this ancient being, to respect its dedication and its love. "All things end," the keeper said gently. "Even us, even you, eventually. But endings are not sad if something continues. We will end, but our memories will continue in you. Our love will continue in you. That is enough. That is more than we ever dared hope for." Elena stepped forward and did something that surprised both of them. She embraced the keeper. Its form was warm and solid against her, more real than it had ever been. She felt its arms wrap around her in return, a gesture that transcended species and time. "Thank you," she whispered, "for waiting for us, for believing we could do this." "Thank you," the keeper replied, its voice cracking with emotion, "for being worthy of the wait, for being the children we always hoped you would become." They stood there for a long moment, two beings separated by